Hi there, and welcome to another edit session. And here we're looking at some shots from a urban portrait session, and I'm just been looking in Bridge at deciding on some images to edit, and for some reason with these images, we seem to have the frame has tilted the way I was holding the camera at an angle for some reason. However, that doesn't really matter because we can correct that. And despite the obvious problem with the completely crazy vertical, I have in fact decided to edit this one. And I think I like these. I like the feeling of light and air which has been captured here. This is 85mm f1.2, which of course creates an extremely narrow depth of field. So we're seeing the model in a fairly tiny slice of in focus space, and as you can see, the whole area behind her is in bokeh, and also the area of the wall immediately behind her has gone out of focus, and in fact even some areas on the scarf are slightly out of focus as well. But that doesn't matter because I like her expression in this one, and as I said, there's just a feeling about this capture which I really like. And I think one of the things that I want to talk about here is there is a danger, I think, particularly when we go into things like action-based edits. And I have talked about this before in other videos, that there can be a danger that we view it as a kind of formula which we just apply in the same fashion to everything. And that can sort of get in the way of our creative process. What we really want to be able to do is to respond to each image in a way that's appropriate to what the image tells us, what the image says to us, what sort of values and attributes we perceive in the image. I've got a couple of other edits from this session here, which where I went for I think a very strong sort of this is quite sort of contrasty, high impact look, and also with this one as well, where it was very much a question of pushing the subject up in terms of luminosity and dropping the background down. And I think that approach was well chosen for these images. But I think we may find with this one that we may want to take a slightly different approach. But anyway, we'll see what happens. So we'll load our image up into Camera Raw, and I think the first thing that I will do is I usually just check white balance, and in fact the auto setting is the same as we've shot. I think I'm happy with the white balance here. I think it's bit overexposed, but not very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reduce the exposure somewhat, but not a huge amount. Because we're trying to, as always, we're trying to find a way to enhance the image and sort of really extract sort of maximum value from our image, whilst hanging on to the sort of virtues that originally attracted us to it. I'm going to add a tiny bit of contrast here. Perhaps shadows ever so slightly. Just a little touch of clarity. Always be very careful not to overdo the clarity. I'm just checking again for highlights on her face. We have something of a highlight on the nose, and I'm just wondering if we ought to drop the exposure more in the interests of removing that, but I'm not sure that we can really. I think we have to live with a certain amount of that highlight there. 0.60. I think we've yeah, I think that looks like a good place. So now we'll open image and go into Photoshop with our edit. And I think the first thing I want to do here is make a copy layer. Control Command J. Use Control Command T to select my transform, my free transform. And now I'm just going to straighten up the vertical on this wall. And I think that looks about right there. And now, of course, I'm going to crop in because the transform has trashed the corners of my image, but that's okay. I can live with that. I'm losing something of my frame in the process of doing this, but I'm happy to live with that. And I think also I find this the wall on the left. There's this area which is metal or glass, and there's the brick. And I'm thinking that I'm just going to pull this right in. So I quite like that. I've just got the corner of the wall preserved. Let's push that back out a little bit more. I quite like the corner of the wall. So anyway, we'll go with that, and we'll use that as our working crop. So now we've straightened up pretty well, I think, and I'm just going to flatten that in, and now I'm going to run my portrait action and start work on that. I think in the nature of this image, because of the frame, the healing stage is probably not going to be quite so important here, simply because we're not quite so close in on her face. But I think, as always, there's a few things we'd like to do. So I'm just going to begin my patching and healing phase, and just as always, I'm just improving some of these skin areas. Before we proceed with the rest of the edit. I don't feel so much like there's a huge amount to do here. And I think you've probably noticed in certain images, the any sort of difficulties of the skin or blemishes seem very, very prominent, and in other captures they don't seem that way, which is to do with the light on the face usually. So I think we're okay with that, and we'll just do a little bit of spot healing. And just as usual, just iron out a few distractions or things that we'd prefer not to have in our image. Okay, and I think that looks all right for me. So I'm going to copy my heal layers up into my frequency separation area, and I think I'm thinking that I am going to apply frequency separation to her face, but I think I'm going to be pretty sparing with it. And apply the low image to the high image, inverted as usual, blend mode to linear light, and then zero in on the face, and just select the area. I'm looking at this forehead area. And I'm going to drop down to 4 pixels here, which gives me a very, very light touch of the smoothing. which I think is going to be perfectly adequate in this image. You could argue that, in fact, the smoothing and frequency separation process is not even required on this image, but the decision I've gone with is to apply it, but as I say, very sparingly. And I'm going to roll back my low layer as well, slightly, and just make sure that I've still got the skin detail I want. I think with this capture, there wasn't skin detail wasn't particularly prominent here, just because of the way it's lit, I think. So I think that will do there, and then we'll make our stump visible layer and move up into our light folder. Okay, so now we can move up into our light folder, and well, I think the obvious thing here is, let's look at our histogram. You can see that from the way the histogram's distributed, it's a very bright image. There's not much on the shadow side of things. We've got this red coming from the hat in the mids, and we've got a kind of mixture of colours up into the highs. And we've got a lot of light in the image. It's very bright. So we might think, well, that our sort of classic strategy might be to try to reduce the luminosity of the background with a view to accentuating the model. And I think we can do this. But I think in this instance, we need to be we need to apply a pretty light touch. And I think that will work for me. And now with my black brush selected and quite a high opacity, sort of fairly low flow as usual. I'm just going to brush that luminosity back onto the subject. So I've reduced the what I'm trying to do is reduce the, if I toggle that off and on again, what I'm trying to do is reduce the background somewhat, but not massively, and I'm going to also roll that back to I think about 60. So my change is fairly subtle, and that's what I'm really trying to focus on in this edit. I'm trying to make my enhancements, but keep them pretty subtle, really. Should I raise the curve on her face? Well, I'm not sure. We can try to lift her slightly, perhaps in the mids. But only slightly. Now I'll invert that mask and select my white brush. Opacity back to about 70. And I can just paint that slight enhancement onto the area of her face and the hat she's wearing. Just toggle that off and check. Yeah, we've just lifted her face slightly. And I think there we'll roll back a little bit as well. Say around 50%. So what we're looking to do is just get a slight lift on her face. Now, on her eyes, let's zoom in on her eyes, and I think we've got quite a lot of light in her eyes there already. But let's see what happens if we try to raise the eyes further. And again, what I'm thinking is it may suit us to invert the mask there again. It may suit us to just raise her eyes a little bit. But just putting my little bit of compensation in on the whites of the eye there. It may suit us to lift the eyes a little bit, but not very much. And it's really not very noticeable, that is it? Just push that up a tiny bit more. But also correspondingly drop it back to around 70, I think. So I hope you can. If I go in a bit closer, I think you can. Hopefully you can see. If I toggle that off and on again, off and on again, I think you can see that we've raised her eyes by a pretty small amount, and I think that works okay. Hair, well, this is one of these images where she's wearing a hat, so we're not really worried about it. We can't really see her hair. We could put a little bit more light into the hat itself. Let's see what that looks like. Let's just paint that onto the hat. I'm, to be honest, not sure if this is really necessary, but I'm just experimenting to see what I think of it. So we've just raised the hat slightly, which is okay. We'll pull that back as well. Just got a little bit of extra light on the hat. Now, in terms of the our color folder, and again, if we consult our histogram and see what we've got happening here. Well, we've got quite a sort of mixture of colours going on. So I think in terms of colour, it's we have this strong sort of brick red tone on the hat. We have this colour-wise, it's a real kind of mixture. So I think that we would just here be in the business of maybe just trying a couple of experiments to see if we like. I'm thinking what we might do is adopt our strategy of altering the color look of the background. And using that to separate our subject from it. So basically, we're applying a kind of color recipe to the background, but not to the model, or perhaps applying a small element of it to the model. We could consider whether we want to push red in the background slightly to sort of echo the colour of the hat. I'm thinking that with this that's the colours in the capture. That's the colour change. And I was thinking that I would using my mask, I would remove that colour, background colour, change from the subject, and we're going for this. What I'm sure by now is a sort of familiar strategy of using colour as well as light to separate our subject from the background. And I think I'll probably push. No, I'll leave that as it is. So I think with the original, as you can see, we had more of the sort of greeny blue tones. And here we've kind of reddened things up a little bit. But I'm going to drop that right out, and I'm just going to feed some of that in. Because what I'm looking for here, again, we're kind of in less is more mode with this edit. I think a very small amount of a change can give us the effect we want, but we are being very, very sparing with it. On her face, I don't really I think the skin tones on her face are fine. I don't really want to say anything about that. Just a little bit more colour in the eyes, I think might work for us. but again fairly pretty gentle change to the colour in the eyes. Just using Navigator to move around the image there. And I'm just painting some of this slightly enhanced colour onto the eyes. Which is a fairly minimal, fairly imperceptible effect, but just gives us a little something. And as I say, in this edit, we're really, I suppose I'm labouring the point slightly now, aren't I? But we're really trying to focus on how to make small enhancements. Wow. I'm just looking at adding a little bit of extra zing on the hat itself. Just on the hat, although I don't invert that. I don't want the hat to distract the viewer's attention from her face, really, so I don't want to make the hat too. Let's just see if that helps. I think the hat does, with this image, the hat does help us to, it draws our eye onto the subject. It's quite prominent. So we need to just accept that it's prominent, and I think that's fine. So hopefully you can see that we've now sorry, I'm just going to snapshot here. Just so I can go back and show you the original. Here's what we started with, obviously with the skewed wall, and here's what we have now. It's more difficult to compare the two because of the tilt on the first one, but I hope you can see that what we've done here is we've made some pretty gentle changes to this image in the hope of trying to enhance it whilst preserving this what we liked in the first place, which is this kind of nice feeling of light and air, and it's just, it's very much a kind of scene in the street, just captured. We just happened to be here in the street, and a car was going by, and the light was pouring down. And we really are trying very hard to preserve that. So hopefully we've had some success in doing that. So now I'm going to make my stamp visible layer to go up into my filters section, and I'm just going to drop into my Nick collection color effects, because I want to see if I can use something we've used before, which is dark and light and center, and whether we ought to use this on this image. And if we would just zero things out on the filter to begin with. Um, where the image is off center, like this one, it's probably a good idea to place the center. So we're telling the filter where we think the center of the image is, and I think it's her face. And as you can see, having done that, I think you can see that if I push the center luminosity up to sort of a ridiculous level, you can see how the filter is working on the basis that her face is the center. So I think once again we could we're thinking about using this, but pretty sparingly. I think maybe center luminosity 15, and if we were to just reduce border luminosity slightly, that's going to it's going to drop our background in relation to her. But I don't think we want to do that very much at all, really. I'm going to leave that on 10%. And I'm going to raise the center size so that the focus of the dark and light and center is fairly wide, covering a fairly wide area relatively. And that I hope is going to be all right. So we'll run that, and we will hoping to see that Nick has given us a kind of fairly restrained enhancement, which has just raised the light on. And if I toggle that off, you can see the effect of that. All right, I think it's noticeable, particularly around her eyes, actually. It's just raised the light on her. But again, I think we'll just roll it back and just pop in a fairly modest amount of that filter, say 46%. And I think that's about all that I want to do with this. The point with this edit is really to focus in on making our changes fairly, making pretty restrained changes and enhancements to our image, and trying very hard not to lose what we liked in the first place. I'm going to stamp again, and I'm just going to drop up into fixes, and I'm just going to see if I feel that I would like to do anything with gamma correction here, which would allow me to darken the background in relation to her. Or push it up. And with gamma correction, as you can see, if we really push gamma correction, we can get a very sort of dramatic effects, really. But I don't think that's what we're looking for here. but we can use, if we use a pretty gentle amount of gamma correction, it can give our image a just kind of tightens it up, focuses it in a little bit somehow, I think. So I'm just going to run that. And once again, if we look back at these other images from this same shoot, where in fact we use gamma correction quite a bit more to reduce the background in relation to the subject, because it seemed the right thing to do on those images. Whereas on this one, I think, as I've said, for me, this one is very much about light and air, and I don't want to do anything that sort of detracts from that. So I think we could say we're done with that one, and finally, I think we just look at our crop again. This is very much like there are a number of images in this shoot where I went for this very off-center framing, and that's how the images were shot. That was not just a crop; it's how they were shot. So I want to keep my frame. I'm just wondering once again if I ought to pull that wall in. But no, I don't like that. Or whether I should keep some of the corner of the wall, but not all of it. Have something a little bit more like that. But I think on balance, I think I'm just going to leave that as it is. Do I want to come down on the top? Yes, I do, just a little bit. Do I want to pull in on the right hand side? I mean, I could pull it in and center her face, but that isn't really the spirit of the composition here. So I think we'll content ourselves. I don't think we'll do anything there. I think we'll just leave well alone there. And so I think that is my edit. On this image, I'm just looking at the light distribution again. Whether I want to add anything else. But I think, looking at it, I think what I would probably do now, and this actually is a very good idea, is to, when you've made your changes to your image, if you have time and if you're able to do it, it can be very helpful to just leave it alone for a while. Go away, do something else, watch the TV, mow the lawn or whatever it is you want to do, and then come back and have another look at it with fresh eyes. Hopefully, in the case of this image, because we have tried pretty hard to sort of keep our changes minimal, hopefully with this image we would be okay. I think you can find sometimes if you make sort of slightly more intense and dramatic changes to an image, it can seem good to you while you're doing it, and then if you take a break and come back, you can easily find yourself thinking, oh my God, what was I thinking? Why did I think that was good? It's obviously far too much for the image. So having a bit of a timeout and coming back to the image can be really helpful. But anyway, so there we are. Portrait, edit, and we'll leave it there. And so once again, thank you so much for watching and listening. And I will, as always, look forward to talking to you further on another video.